Hey guys, this is Toby Mathis, and today we're going to be going over what kind of lawsuits pick up during a recession, and more importantly, what you can do about them and what you can do to avoid any nasty surprises. So we're going to jump right on in. Before we do, I just want to say go there, go hit the subscribe button. If you've never been on my channel before, go take a look at a lot of the videos and you get an idea of what we're all about sharing information, make sure you get good ideas. If you like it, please click like and subscribe. If you know people that this could benefit, this type of information could benefit, then just forward it to them. That's enough of that. So let's talk about what's going on here. Right now, we have this. I think we're probably in the fourth worst market opening of ever. So we have this major what is shaping up to be a pretty massive recession. Regardless of what side of the politics you're on, whether you believe it's a recession or not, we've had 2 quarters of negative GDP, and we're looking at it's not getting any better. We've had high inflation. You see all sorts of craziness going on out there. Regardless of what you believe about what causes the inflation, whether it's the monetary supply chain issues, whatever, and whether you think the Fed is doing what's necessary to curb it. At the end of the day, there's usually going to be economic pain. And then we see a little uptick in lawsuits. And more specifically, what types of lawsuits should we be expecting, right? Well, the first off is if somebody's experiencing pain, quite often they want to share it. And the place that you share it in the law is civil litigation. So you're going to see civil litigation increase. You're going to see more lawsuits of people that may have let something slide. They're going to start to pursue it because it might be their only means of getting ahead. Maybe they're just not feeling overly generous. Maybe it's a tap in a parking lot, and the next thing you know, you're dealing with insurance claims and lawsuits. There's generally an uptick in litigation. Plus, you have a lot more breach of contract claims. If 2008 is any example to us, what happens is people are not able to honor an agreement, especially if they're making payments or something, and the remedy is to be sued in court. And depending on how bad that goes, then it takes us into area number 2. So we go from civil litigation right into bankruptcy, where people can't afford to pay things. They have more liabilities than they have assets. And the next thing you know, they're trying to wipe it clean by going into bankruptcy court. So we see a massive uptick during recessions and bankruptcies, especially Chapter 7, which is complete liquidation. It's like, hey, I'm wiping out my debt. I'm going to start fresh. I'm going to get another, I'm going to get, boop, clean slate. Lots of people do it. Lots of businesses do it. The other area that we see quite often is in employment. If you're an employer, expect to see more claims, especially if you have to lay people off. So the Fed is jacking up interest rates with the idea that they actually want more unemployment to stem demand, to cause inflation to go down. That's actually one of their stated objectives. So what's going to happen? It's going to put pressure. It's going to make put pressure on businesses. Boy, we are in one of the lowest, if not the lowest, unemployment market ever. And there's only one direction that you can really go in these circumstances, which is cause higher unemployment. When it happens, people generally are not too pleased about losing their job. And that's where they turn around. And if there's not ample jobs, like right now, we are in a great job market. This is bizarre. We're having this massive crash in the economy, but unemployment's really low. If that shifts, and it tends to shift quickly, then people that lose their jobs, if they can't get one right away, what are they going to do? They're going to talk to, their cousin Joe, who knows a lawyer, who then says, let's see what we got. We have wrongful termination. We have discrimination claims. We have wage claims of, hey, you didn't pay me enough. Hey, I wasn't tracking my time. I did lots of overtime you never paid me on. And you end up with a lot of these things. The problem with that type of litigation, by the way, is quite often it can be personal. So even if you have a business, even if you say I have an S Corp or a C Corp or PLLC, PC, PA, whatever it is, even if I have a separate entity, I'm not operating as a sole proprietor. A lot of people think they're good. When you have wages, if you have unpaid taxes, if you have those types of claims, it can be personal, especially discrimination. They like to go after the individual owner and they say you violated my rights, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, you're looking at personal liability as well as in the business. So that sometimes the business isn't going to hold up. they'll argue all sorts of different things, alter ego. They'll say, like, again, if it's wage claims, quite often the officers and directors are responsible anyway. If it's discrimination, they can go after you individually as well. So that's just something that you're going to have to deal with as a business owner. You're going to try to make sure that those things don't happen. Make sure you have good HR. Make sure you're treating people fairly, that you're not engaging in any weird practices, and that you're not playing games, and that you're not just knee-jerk reacting on things. And make sure that you're talking to attorneys if in doubt. But usually good HR is going to keep you out of a lot of the trouble, but just sometimes there's ambulance chasing lawyers. No offense to the lawyers out there, but you know who you are, that just make claims, and they know that if a claim has any merit at all, it's going to be worth 30, 40 grand to that individual. They're going to try to get a quick settlement. If you have insurance, like if you don't have insurance, make sure you get E&O insurance or some sort of insurance to cover you in the event employees do things. And I would just add this caveat, because this happened last recession. Make sure you have something for employee dishonesty and theft, because sometimes people get into bad situations and good people do bad things. And sometimes you're the low-lying fruit, especially if you've known them for quite a while. They feel more comfortable stealing from you than from a stranger. So make sure you have good coverage. Just check with your insurance agent on that. The last area, which is what we saw in 2008, 9, and 10, is foreclosure law. If you can't pay your mortgage, if you don't have enough equity, expect the bank to foreclose on you. Or if you're not making payments, even if there is equity, they'll still foreclose on you. What's interesting right now is that Black Knight, I believe, came out with data that shows that the average equity in a house in the United States is upwards of $200,000 now. We've had some slowdown, but I would imagine it's still in that neighborhood. I think it was 210 last time I checked. So there's a lot of equity out there. And we're not seeing massive amounts of defaults on mortgages. They were pretty darn cheap. Now, interest rates have gone up and mortgages are more expensive, but for what they were before, it's not horrible. Like, we were at historically low interest rates. We were like 3%, 2%, just really low interest rates. So I don't necessarily think we're going to see an uptick in foreclosure, although it does happen. And I did look at some stuff. It's like, for civil caseloads, unemployment claims in 2007 through 9 increased by 89%. Eviction and unlawful detainer cases increased by 49. Collection cases by 32. Those are civil cases. Breach of contract increased by 25%. Like, those are just some basic numbers. It's like, whoa. It's just generally litigation tends to tick up during a downturn. And also regulators tend to step up enforcement too. Like, again, if the economy is faltering, guess who's not making as much money? The tax recipients, right? If unemployment starts popping up, guess what there's less of? It's employment taxes and things like that. And we oftentimes see companies, by the way, that are victims of breach too, and they're having to file claims. And so you just see an uptick. I thought it was really interesting that the employment claims, though, jumped by almost 90%. Again, that's if you have to lay people off. So if you do whatever you can to keep your staff, make sure that you're not doing anything that's just, again, like, hey, I anticipate this, so I'm going to let some people off, and then it doesn't come to fruition, and you bought yourself some lawsuits. Ways that you get pierced. So let's just kind of talk about this real, in general. Number one is if you're commingling your business and your personal, especially if you're a sole proprietor, just expect all your stuff to be at risk. If you do have a business, make sure it's separate from you. When I say separate, make sure you're not buying your groceries out of the business, that you're keeping good books and records, separate books and records, separate checking account. Pay your business expenses through your business, not through, like, don't pay any personal expenses through that business. If you need money, pay it out in a draw or pay it out in wages. But whatever the case, do not just use your business to cover things because personal expenses, because if you do, you're going to be the recipient of an argument that you are an alter ego and that you're commingling personal and corporate funds, which we don't want you to do. That's just gets you into all sorts of issues. It's what they call piercing the veil, which is realistically, I clerked for a judge who used to always say it's basically a fairness thing. It's, hey, it's not equitable to recognize this entity given the way you treated it. In other words, you showed disrespect to the entity, and so should the court. If you show respect to your entity, so will the court. So it's one of those things. It's like, just expect to be treated the way that or your entity be treated the way you treat it. If you treat it with respect, then so will others. If you treat it with disrespect, don't expect it to protect you. The other one I already mentioned, which is employment violations and employer. Usually there's like this argument of, who's the employer. It could include officers, directors, even managers. And if there's federal wage and hour violations, especially, they could be held responsible. California and other states sometimes have very liberal interpretation of who can be responsible. And yes, you could absolutely be personally liable. I'll show you in a second some things that you could do. The other thing is, if you start experiencing pain and you have shareholders or investors, expect fiduciary duty claims. That's, again, those are civil suits. So they fall into that first setting. And we did see, again, I think the stats was a 25% uptick in just traditional civil suits. But if you are an officer or director of a company and you do something that causes harm, economic harm, hey, I was betting the market and I was day trading and I was doing all these things and you lost money, chances are you're going to be held responsible for breaching your fiduciary duty. Other things that you could be held personally responsible for: taxes of an organization. Again, payroll taxes are easy ones, but if there's other taxes that are due, I remember just going through this on one case, is if you are a responsible party, and for example, it could be a DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, but let's say you're the responsible party and you have a truck or you have an automobile and something's not paid, the taxes aren't paid, you could be responsible personally. A lot of times government agencies just kind of look through these things and go after you. And whenever there's a downturn, people start looking for all the cash they can get, and sometimes they skimp on what they owe in taxes, which can be a big no-no. It can cause you all sorts of trouble. Last area that I see quite often, and then we'll go over some of the solutions and how you can kind of keep yourself out of harm's way, is if you have personal guarantees on things. So a lot of people think that they have business credit. They'll have a business line of credit and they think, oh, good, it's the businesses. Okay, that could be true unless you are a personal guarantee on it. So, for example, American Express will give your business a credit card. And let's say you have a $50,000 credit card. That's great. It's not reporting to your personal credit. You go look at your FICO score and you say, ha, 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 it's not reporting to me. I'm not responsible, but you actually are the personal guarantor. You will definitely want to check on those things in case your business is in peril during a downturn. Now, we just had the pandemic. If there was ever a downturn where you learn these things, it was probably then. But if we go in and the Fed keeps jacking up interest rates and we continue in a recession and some of that bleeds over into your business, you just want to make sure which debts you're actually personally responsible for. And so if you have two different types of lines of credit cards, or you're accessing credit from someplace, and on one of them you are not a personal guarantor, on the other one you are, guess which one you are paying off first? The one that has the personal guarantor, that does not have that has the personal guarantor. You want to make sure that's paid off first, and the one that does not is the one that you keep a balance on, because they'll be looking at the business only, not you individually. All right, let's talk about some other solutions. All right, so I'm going to bring up a screen here and I'll pop myself into the corner. So whenever we're talking about business and we start talking about lawsuits, we always kind of start off with these quadrants here. We look at our personal realm. Hey, here's the personal realm, and you might have a house, you might have a car, you have all these things. These are those assets that are over in that realm. And I'm just going to call this the personal. Personal. Then you also have business. Yay. And this is where you might have some sort of structured entity, LLC or Inc., and we'll just call it the pizza shop. That's your business, right? Whatever your business is, we'll just say that there's things that happen inside that pizza shop, and we want to isolate it. We want to put a box around it. So almost always, this is going to be some sort of limited liability entity, which is equal to an LLC, LP, Inc., etc. It's some sort of state entity, with the idea that if something goes wrong inside the pizza shop, it stays in that box and they cannot come after you. In other words, we can prevent it from coming after you. So we want to isolate that. On the same token, we really want to make it so that if something happens to you, I get a foreclosure that they can't come after and take my pizza shop. So quite often we might have a holding entity included in there. But again, it's always dependent. Again, I'm not too worried about foreclosures, but let's say that you have a car payment issue. Oh my gosh, I all of a sudden I can't make my car payment. I have job issues, or I can't do the gig work I was doing before. And so we just want to keep those things to where they can't come into your business. They would have to go after you personally. And then after they go after you, then they might try to look at some of your assets and supplemental proceedings. We don't want them just to be able to go straight on in there. And then even if they do, we want to make sure that we have some protections. And I'll go over some of those things that you do. Now that we're talking about the pizza shop, actually, I'm going to do one other thing here. We're going to go over the non-risk assets. And this is your money, your brokerage account. These are non-risk assets. In other words, having cash that somebody's not going to sue you for slipping on your cash. And we want to protect that. We want to put that, and I call it a virtual safe. But a virtual safe is something like an LLC, but it's more specifically a Wyoming LLC. And the reason that we use a Wyoming LLC is because your name's not listed in a public record anywhere associated with that entity. And even if they get a judgment against you, so somebody sues the pants out of you and you owe big bucks, they still cannot take this. Pretend that's a line. They still cannot get to the Wyoming LLC because it has a charging order protection. They cannot touch the money. It is stuck outside of that. So we like to protect it. We like to keep the money separate from you so that so if something happens to you, like it could be even a car accident, let's say you have kids or somebody gets into a car accident and they just make some outlandish claims. You want to make sure that they can't, if the money's sitting over here in your personal realm, then they can take it. They can garnish it. They can take it. We want to make sure that they cannot. And so this would require, just extraordinary activity to get through a Wyoming entity. It's almost impossible. It almost never happens. I've never seen it happen, except in one case, which is somebody that was engaged in fraud. So if you engage in fraud, you might have issues. But for our clients, which we do probably 10,000 tax returns a year. We do tens of thousands of these around the country, and we put together all sorts of structures over the last 23 years. Never seen one pierced. So it's like, okay, that works pretty darn good. I mean, thousands and thousands of times. And we've seen some pretty big lawsuits come after folks, especially in 2008, 9, 10, during that recession. So we know it works. It makes it very, very difficult. A client dead to rights, holding about a $30 million obligation because of a personal guarantor or personal guarantee. They were staring down this lawsuit and they had assets. We had structured the assets, and the lawyers quite specifically said, you have a tangled web, and they settled. It was over $30 million, and then we settled for less than $2 million. And we've had that repeatedly throughout the years. You're just trying to settle things, keep the people from shaking you down. It doesn't mean that you avoid debts that you're legally responsible for or morally responsible for. But in this case, there was lots of other people involved, and our client had a deep pocket. They were, again, we were able to settle it. They didn't walk away for nothing. It was painful, but it was a lot less painful than what would have happened had they not had that structure. And then we have risk assets. Risk assets are things like rental properties. So I'll put a couple rental properties. Let's actually give you three rental properties. And we want to make sure that if something happens to one of those properties, it doesn't come out and they don't come after you. Like if you have a bad tenant, again, recessions have a funny way of bringing out bad actors. And they say, oh, you did bad things to me, or I was discriminated against, or you get, black mold. I want to sue the hell out of you for black mold. They can't. They're stuck inside their little vehicle here unless they can show some path for the alter ego or some sort of criminal or fraudulent activity. Almost impossible. In those types of cases, it's going to stay inside that box. You might lose the equity in that one property, but then everything else is safe. Even our pizza shop is safe, right? So we always start from the standpoint of let's keep things isolated. By the way, you can put a Wyoming entity around that too and make it almost impossible to get to. So that if you do have a liability out here in your personal, again, you get sued, one of your kids runs into a busload of nuns and they sue the heck out of you, or hits a young neurosurgeon, and it's millions of dollars. You know that, hey, you know what? I have protection here. I have protection here. They can't get to it. The pizza shop, we could even put protections on and make it not an attractive target. It doesn't mean that you walk away and you don't pay and you don't settle things reasonably. It just means that, hey, they can't force you. They can't go take your stuff. It makes it extraordinarily difficult and it forces a settlement. So 9 times out of 10, you're just going to settle. 99.9 times out of 100, you're just going to settle. I'll leave it at that. It's the exception to the rule that somebody goes through all the expense of going to trial when they can't guarantee some sort of recovery. They don't know what you own. All right. Now, since we are talking about a lot of employment claims and things like that, let's talk about how I might deal with this. So I'm just going to assume that your business, so we're just going to redo this business here. Let's say it's a pizza shop. And hey, this recession is really starting to wear on you. So you have a pizza shop and you have a supplier issue, or you had to lay off some people. Let's just do layoffs. Hey, we had some layoffs. And they said, that was discrimination. You shouldn't have done it. And they're angry and you have a lawsuit and they're looking at you. And let's say that over the years, you've done well and you've been keeping the money sitting in that business. Guess what you cannot remove now, right? We have something called a fraudulent conveyance. Once you know that you're on the hook, you have a liability, you can't take that money away or they can follow it. But if all through that time, here you are, all pre-lawsuit, so we'll just say pre-lawsuit issues, like the cause of the lawsuit, so the termination. You are constantly making money, but then you were in the habit of taking it out, and literally this is what it actually does. Here, I'll put that line back through. What happens is you take the cash out to you and you put it into your brokerage account. Let's say that you were in the habit of doing that, and maybe it even paid you a W-2 wage and distributions, but you were always taking the cash out. So at the end of the day, the money wasn't sitting in your personal, in your business. The money was sitting up here in that brokerage account in a nice, safe place. Let's see if I can make this go down like that. So it's sitting in that brokerage account. Why does that matter? Because now you have angry person who sues, and guess what? There's no money. There's no money in there. It might be making money. It might be making some money, and you might be still paying yourself a W-2 wage. You might even still be considering your practice of distributions, and all during that suit, you're just moving the money, but you're not moving something outside the reach that you would normally be doing as part of your business. That's where you want to be. You want to be in this habit of draining the business of the cash on a consistent basis, keeping enough there for operating capital. Like, you don't want to be, hey, you had all these liabilities and you were draining the cash out of it. Okay, that doesn't work. That's why I say it's pre-lawsuits, pre-having that actual obligation. If you have lots of liabilities and they exceed your assets, and so this is where you become insolvent. Like, we want to make sure that we're still solvent as we're moving our money. So you're paying your bills. You're not like, hey, I'm not going to pay my rent. I'm not going to pay my suppliers. And I'm just going to pull all the money out. You can't be doing that. No, it's, hey, I pay the bills as they come due, and I have extra money every month. I make a profit. And instead of just leaving it in the business, you move it back out to yourself and you move it over here into your brokerage. What that does is it's twice removed from your business. Now you get massive lawsuit. They accuse you of alter ego or something like that, and they come after you. Even then, they still cannot get into your brokerage account, in your money. In this, I'll just call this a safe LLC. Your safe LLC is still safe. You got to be in that practice, though. Even better yet, if you're doing a W-2, this is kind of fun. You could be sitting over here. I'll put this up in your personal, but you could have that 401k or something where it's also being put aside. That works too. You could have an IRA. That works too. Get it in there. What matters is that it's not sitting in the business bank account. First off, that's the most important. That's 99 out of 100. You don't have an issue. The 1 out of 100, which is the outlier, they may try to come after you personally, and you want to make sure it's not sitting in your personal affairs. Like it's not sitting in your personal checking or personal savings. You just want to get it over. Hey, goes into the mortgage account or the brokerage account. Fantastic. Or it's in a 401k or it's in an IRA. Even if it's invested in real estate and it's out of your name, that's what we care about. If it's not in your name, they can't go take it. If they come after you personally, then they're going to have limited items that they can go get. Nobody really wants your car. Your house is almost always protected under some form of homestead, or you have loans against it, so there's no equity, and it's really tough to get to a house anyway. So there's all these things. Like in my state, I think we have 600,000 ish that is protected. In Texas and Florida, you have unlimited homesteads. If you're in California, yours stinks. Like some states, it's 10,000. So my best advice to you is make sure you have some sort of HELOC or something, some loan against your house, so that they're never looking at that. Your cars, nobody really wants. It's really the cash. They want your checking account, your savings. But again, we don't even get there. We're doing this right. We're honoring our formalities. We're not being bad people. It's staying inside the pizza shop. And worst case scenario, you have a massive lawsuit. You let off, hey, I had to lay off 4 people, and they all get together with the local lawyer and say, we're going to sue the heck out of the pizza shop. Worst case scenario, hopefully you have insurance for those things, but if you don't, worst case is you lose the pizza shop. I know it sucks, but that's better than losing all the cash and as well. So we've isolated the cash. So that's number one, is just operate in a business-like manner and move that cash out. Do not leave it. Same thing, and we go over here and we're looking at our houses. Let's say that we have some wonderful houses and you make good money and you're just leaving lots of cash in all these accounts. Like your property manager is collecting the money and they're not sending it to you. When they send it to you, let's say they send it up to the parent, again, distribute it to yourself, put it back into a safe. Distribute it out. Make sure that those dollars are not sitting in those entities for somebody to say, aha, do not move it, it's mine. You'll be kicking yourself if you have somebody fall down the stairs on a house and you have $100,000 sitting in the bank account. It's too late. You move that money, you're guilty. They're going to push it back. And there might be some extra liability on top of it. Somebody falls down your stairs, you pull the cash out, that's a fraudulent conveyance. You're going to be in some deep water or hot water at some point if they find out. Hopefully you have a good insurance, maybe they're able to settle it and keep it, but don't even play that game. Just get used to taking the cash out, putting it someplace safe. I keep saying that over and over again. It's a safe LLC. It's like burying it in the desert. If you're doing that and you're consistently doing that and you're not insolvent, you're not putting yourself into a claim where you can be bankrupt, you're going to be so much happier. Here, I'll pull myself back up. So I hope that made sense. We want to take an asset that is low-lying fruit like cash. We want to move it from an entity that could have liability like a business or a risky, risk asset holding entity. Like if you have rental properties, Airbnb, any of those are risk. If you have it in an LLC, a piece of property in there, you don't want to keep your cash there. If you have a business, you don't want to keep your cash there. If you have a business, you don't want to personally guarantee obligations. If you do personally guarantee obligations, you want to make sure that those are paid back before the non-personal guaranteed. If you're in any economic strife, you want to make sure that they're limited. Creditors are limited at what they can take, and that they can't get into your personal savings, and that they can't get into where you're actually storing a bunch of your wealth. I've seen this. I saw the ramifications during the recession, the Great Recession, Depression, whatever you want to call it, when we had this massive drawback in 2007, 8, 9, 10, even 11, even 12. When you look at that time frame, and there was what we call winners and losers. There was people that were able to walk away from bad situations and not have it follow them. And there was other people that had to go into bankruptcy to stop it. And it followed them all over the place, and they lost massive amounts of their wealth. I would much rather you be in that category of people that are able to walk away from areas that it's no longer feasible for you to continue. minimize the exposure, minimize the target that's on your back. Again, one of the things I didn't talk about a lot is this idea of security through obscurity. When we use Wyoming entities, it doesn't show up in a public record. So if somebody's thinking, I might go after that person, and they do a record search, and they're just trying to see what you own, and you structured your assets into LLCs and you use Wyoming LLCs to hold them. So on the non-risk side and on the risk side, they can't see those. That goes a long way to preventing anybody from even molesting you in the first place. We call it attorney begun. They can't see it. They don't know it's there. If they don't know it's there, they can't go try to take it. And that prevents some lawyers from even taking a case if they don't know that there's going to be a recovery. Or better yet, if you do have some insurance, it keeps them from trying to go beyond the insurance. A lot of times, attorneys will make claims that they know will get covered by insurance and do not submit claims that won't be, because they don't want to put you and the insurance carrier at odds. In other words, if they want a settlement, the last thing they want is the insurance carrier to say, well, actually, we're not covering this because the portion that we cover on is this claim and we value it this, but the other claims aren't something covered by the policy. So you're going to have to deal with them on your own. And all of a sudden you're looking at it going, wait a second, I thought I was going to get a nice insurance recovery. No, lawyers are smart in that. They're going to read the policy and they're going to say, here's the claims that we're going to make. If they want to break the policy and go after your personal asset, they better have a reason to do it, because otherwise they might be giving up the money, and they don't do it if they don't have a good reason to do it, and especially if they're not going to make a recovery. It prevents that sort of behavior. So that's it. Looks like we're in a recession, smells like a recession, tastes like a recession, it walks like a recession, it talks like a recession. We're probably in a recession. And what types of lawsuits pick up? You're going to be looking at a lot of those civil cases. You might see foreclosures, bankruptcies, employment claims. All those things are probably going to be going up like they did last time. Employment claims went up almost 90% last time. So just be prepared. Take action now. Do not wait for a claim to be filed. Just know that with Uncle Fed raising interest rates constantly, trying to break the system, trying to combat inflation, the way they do it is by subjecting us to pain. Make sure that that pain is not devastating pain. It's more of a nuisance instead of something that's life-altering, by making sure your assets are not an easy target. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you next time.